Laura had devoted 6 years to hiding her secret, firmly believing that the past would remain in the shadows, never to resurface. Yet, in a single instant, everything began to fall apart. She never intended for her daughter to catch sight of him. To her surprise, Emma dashed toward the most influential figure present, took his hand, and uttered the single word that transformed everything. "Father." Julian Carter's piercing green eyes darted to the child at his feet. Then, gradually, they rose, towards her. Laura's heart raced with intensity. She had devoted countless years to ensuring this would never come to pass. Yet, at this moment, escape seemed impossible. Laura King had always preferred to keep her work life separate from her home life, but today, circumstances left her with no alternative. With the babysitter canceling at the last minute, Laura found herself in a tight spot, unable to miss her shift. Being employed as a maid at one of New York's most opulent hotels required adherence to stringent guidelines, with one of the paramount rules being to keep personal issues separate from her professional responsibilities. Yet, what options were available to her? She found herself alone, with no family close by and no friends available to care for Emma on such short notice. Thus, she arrived at the only conclusion possible: she brought her daughter along, hoping fervently that she would remain silent and unobtrusive. Upon stepping into the magnificent lobby of the hotel, Laura gently grasped Emma's tiny hand, speaking in a hushed tone. "Keep in mind what I shared with you, dear. Keep by my side and refrain from speaking to anyone, understood?" Emma nodded, her green eyes sparkling with intrigue as she absorbed the grandeur of the massive crystal chandeliers, the gleaming marble floors, and the elegantly attired guests gliding effortlessly through the room. She found herself in a place unlike any she had ever experienced. To her, it appeared as if it had been plucked straight from the pages of a fairy tale. Laura, however, found herself too preoccupied to appreciate the opulence surrounding her. With her gaze fixed on the ground, she hurried along, keenly aware of the need to remain inconspicuous after bending the rules by bringing her daughter along. But then, just as they reached the housekeeping service door, Emma suddenly stopped. Her tiny hand slipped from Laura's hold, and before Laura could respond, the little girl stepped back, her gaze fixed on something, or someone, on the other side of the room. Suddenly, she took off, her feet pounding against the ground. Laura felt her heart race to a near halt. "Emma," she called, her voice laced with urgency. She hurried after her daughter, but Emma was quick, darting through the bustling lobby with unexpected grace for a 6-year-old. Everything unfolded in an instant. When Laura finally arrived, Emma had already paused before a tall man dressed in a flawlessly fitted dark suit. As soon as she recognized the figure before her, her breath hitched in her throat. Julian Carter. He stood at the reception desk, exuding an air of authority, his piercing green eyes locked onto an unseen point ahead, until Emma rushed in, wrapping her tiny arms around his leg and holding on as if they shared an unbreakable bond. Laura felt a sharp pang in her stomach. In a voice brimming with unwavering conviction, Emma uttered the single word that rendered the entire lobby silent. "Father." Julian stood still, caught in a moment of disbelief. Gradually, he cast his gaze downward, his demeanor transforming from slight annoyance to total bewilderment. His gaze locked with Emma's for a moment before drifting away, scanning the crowd until it finally settled on Laura. For an extended pause, everyone remained still. Laura experienced a sudden and disorienting shift, as if the very earth had vanished from under her. She longed to seize Emma and flee, to erase this moment, to act as if it had never occurred. However, the moment had passed. Julian Carter, the very person she had dedicated years to evading, now stood before her, his expression a blend of surprise, recognition, and an unidentifiable emotion. A perilous situation. In that moment, she realized that everything had irrevocably changed. Laura felt every muscle in her body tighten as Julian's piercing green eyes fixed on hers. The hotel lobby, previously alive with the buzz of chatter and the gentle clink of glasses, now descended into an eerie stillness. She noticed the bewilderment in his face, the subtle crease of his brows, as if he were attempting to assemble a puzzle that defied logic. Yet, what filled her with the deepest dread was the understanding crystallizing in his eyes. He was observing her intently. His gaze was fixed on Emma. Emma remained attached to his leg, her tiny fingers clutching the fabric of his costly suit as if she had at last discovered something, or someone, she had been seeking. She gazed up at him with sparkling, naive eyes, anticipating, hoping for something Laura wasn't certain Julian was capable of providing. Julian gently eased Emma's hands apart, his actions deliberate and cautious, as if any sudden motion might disrupt the fragile atmosphere surrounding them. He lowered himself to her height, his towering figure bending elegantly, and examined her features as though discovering them anew. His jaw clenched just a bit, and Laura understood precisely what was unfolding in his mind. The identical shade of deep brown hair. The identical captivating green eyes. The identical sharp features that reflected his own. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual, yet still held an undeniable authority. "Who instructed you to express that?" Emma tilted her head, a look of bewilderment crossing her face. "No one." His demeanor remained unchanged. "So, what made you refer to me in that way?" Emma furrowed her brow, clearly indicating that the answer should have been apparent. "Because you are my father." Julian took a sharp breath, as though the words had struck him with force. Laura knew she had to put an end to this situation. She hurried ahead, softly drawing Emma away from him, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Emma, darling, please come here." Emma refrained from confrontation, yet her gaze met Laura's with a hint of doubt, her delicate brows knitting together. "Have I made a mistake?" Laura managed a smile, though a sense of panic gripped her heart. "Not right now, darling, but we really must leave." Just as she was about to turn away, Julian stood tall, effectively obstructing her way. His presence loomed large, as it always had, and Laura despised how effortlessly he could still diminish her sense of self. His voice had taken on a sharper quality, measured yet laced with an undercurrent of danger. "Laura. What on earth is happening?" She swallowed hard, her grip on Emma's hand tightening. "It's insignificant. She's simply bewildered." Julian emitted a brief, mirthless chuckle, subtly shaking his head. Perplexed. He cast another look at Emma, then shifted his gaze to Laura, his demeanor growing more somber. "She appears quite certain. She appears confident." Laura felt a knot in her stomach. She had to escape this place. She had to take Emma away before this spiraled into something beyond her grasp. But before she could move forward, Julian's voice lowered, his words cutting through the silence like a sharp knife. "Does she belong to me?" Laura's breath hitched. The question lingered in the air, heavy and oppressive, and for a fleeting instant, she contemplated fabricating a story, rejecting the truth, acting as if this moment was merely a figment of her imagination. Julian Carter was not the kind of person to tolerate anything less than the whole truth. He would dismantle every falsehood until he uncovered the truth he sought. She locked eyes with him, her grip on Emma's hand growing firmer. "Julian, it's time for us to leave." His jaw tightened. "Please provide a response." Laura sensed the gentle grip of Emma's small fingers around her own, a wordless request for comfort. She had always hoped this moment would remain a distant thought. She had always kept it a secret from Julian. Yet now, there was no way out. Drawing in a hesitant breath, she compelled herself to utter the words that would alter the course of everything. "Absolutely." The solitary word pierced the silence that hung between them, sharp and sudden like a gunshot. Julian remained still. He remained utterly still. The sole indication that he had acknowledged her presence was the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, each breath deliberate and measured, as though he were striving to hold back something volatile within. His gaze darted back to Emma, and in that moment, Laura noticed a change in his demeanor. The astonishment lingered, yet it had begun to intertwine with another emotion. Something incomprehensible. A chilling experience. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, yet the underlying strength was unmistakable. This isn't over yet. And Laura understood, with unwavering conviction, that he was sincere. Laura's hold on Emma's hand grew firmer, the heaviness of Julian's words pressing down on her. The manner in which he expressed it, serene and composed, yet laced with an undeniable intensity, sent a chill coursing through her. He was not asking for anything. He had no intention of engaging in a dialogue. He was articulating a message, a proclamation of purpose, and she understood its significance completely. Julian Carter was not the type of individual who easily moved on from matters. She took a deep breath, steeling herself to maintain her composure. Emma continued to observe them, acutely aware of the tension in the air, though its full meaning eluded her. Laura needed to remove her from this situation before it escalated into something far more dire. "Julian," she said with measured calm, "this isn't the right moment or setting for this." His jaw clenched subtly, yet his gaze remained fixed on hers. "Just let me know the time and place." Her heart raced. She required some contemplation. For 6 long years, she had sidestepped this very moment, persuading herself that shielding him from the truth was the wisest choice. He had never desired a family. He had become entirely absorbed in his enterprise, in authority, in dominance. The Julian she remembered from years past had unequivocally demonstrated that nothing, neither love, nor commitment, nor even the chance of something genuine, held more significance than his empire. And yet, as she stood there, with Emma gripping her fingers and Julian looking at her as if she had just broken the very core of his existence, she understood that she had misjudged him. Emma adjusted her position, gazing up at Julian with an inquisitive expression. "Are you familiar with my mother?" Laura's breath caught in her throat. Julian's expression softened ever so slightly as he cast his gaze down at the little girl. "Indeed," he replied, his tone now more subdued. "Once upon a time." Emma furrowed her brow, tilting her head slightly. "So, what kept you from seeking us out?" Laura sensed the color leave her cheeks. As she prepared to steer the dialogue in a new direction, Julian interjected before she could utter a word. His eyes darted back to Laura, and in that moment, she realized she had relinquished her grip. "That's an intriguing question," he remarked, his tone crisp, laced with an undercurrent of tension. "Perhaps your mother might have the answer to that." Emma gazed up at her with anticipation, blissfully ignorant of the tempest swirling among the grown-ups in the room. Laura inhaled deeply, striving to maintain her poise. "Emma, my dear, shall we make our way home? The day has stretched on endlessly." Emma paused briefly, yet she gave a nod of agreement. Just as Laura was about to take a step, Julian advanced, once more obstructing her way. "You're not going to walk away from this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, meant only for her ears. "This time, no." Her stomach nodded. She ought to have realized it wouldn't be so simple. Julian had always pursued his desires with unwavering determination. He was determined to ensure she didn't vanish without getting the answers she deserved. She locked eyes with him, raising her chin just a bit, determined not to yield. "I have no obligations to you." A flicker passed through his expression, anger, disbelief, and an elusive depth that she struggled to identify. "The truth is something you owe me." Laura tightened her jaw. She wished to avoid this conversation in the bustling hotel lobby, with Emma positioned between them, observing intently. She required some time. She required some distance. However, Julian had no intention of offering her either. She released a slow breath. "All right. On the morrow. Let's rendezvous at the cafe located at the intersection of 5th and Madison at 10 o'clock. Julian regarded her intently, weighing the truth of her words in his mind. He offered a brief nod. "I will be present." Laura took action without hesitation. She pivoted, leading Emma toward the exit, acutely aware of Julian's intense gaze piercing her back all the way out. Her heart raced as she entered the cool evening air. For 6 long years, she had guarded this secret. In under 5 minutes, the entire landscape had shifted. On the morrow, she would confront the repercussions. Laura hardly found any rest that night. She reclined in bed, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, attuned to the gentle rhythm of Emma's breath beside her. The burden of the earlier events in the hotel enveloped her, suffocating and relentless. For 6 long years, she had evaded Julian Carter, reassuring herself that her choice was justified, that safeguarding Emma's existence from a man like him was the only path to ensure her daughter's safety. Yet, in just a few fleeting moments, everything had come apart at the seams. And tomorrow, she would confront him. Thoughts swirled chaotically, each one a potential disaster waiting to unfold. Julian was not one to take things at face value. He would insist on answers, seeking clarity and understanding. And Laura felt uncertain about whether she possessed the strength to offer them. She shifted onto her side, observing the gentle rise and fall of Emma's delicate chest. She had poured her heart and soul into ensuring her daughter had a fulfilling life. But had she taken something from her as well? Had she taken it upon herself to decide something that wasn't truly hers to decide? As dawn broke, her anxiety had reached its peak. Emma awoke brimming with vitality, blissfully ignorant of the tempest swirling within Laura's thoughts. She hummed while enjoying her breakfast, excitedly sharing her thoughts on the books she planned to dive into that day and the games she was eager to play. Laura compelled herself to smile, striving to conceal her own unease. As the clock inched closer to 10, she stood outside the cafe on 5th and Madison, her fingers clutching the strap of her purse with an intensity that betrayed her nerves. She had deliberately selected this location. The setting was open and impartial, a space where neither party could let their emotions run wild. Yet, as she remained there, anticipation coursing through her, her heart thudded so fiercely that she feared she might lose her composure. Julian made his entrance precisely at the appointed hour. He approached her with an unwavering assurance, his presence effortlessly authoritative. His dark brown hair was impeccably styled, his luxurious suit crisply pressed as though he had just emerged from a high-stakes meeting. Yet his eyes, those piercing green orbs that had once enchanted her, now held a chill that was unmistakable. Silently, he swung the door open and motioned for her to enter. She paused for just a moment before crossing the threshold. The cafe exuded a serene calm, the morning hustle now a distant memory. She selected a quaint table tucked in the corner, shielded from curious gazes, and settled in, her hands intertwined on the surface. Julian settled into the chair opposite her, leaning forward with his forearms on the table, his eyes locked onto hers. Silence enveloped them for what felt like an eternity. The atmosphere between them was charged, silent thoughts hanging in the air like a dense mist. At last, Julian shattered the stillness. "Begin the conversation." Laura took a deep breath, attempting to regain her composure. "Where would you like me to begin?" His jaw clenched. "You are fully aware of the location." She averted her gaze for a brief instant, collecting her reflections. As she finally found her voice, it emerged softer than she had intended. 2 weeks after our breakup, I discovered I was pregnant." Julian paused, his response lingering in the air. He simply gazed at her, his face a mask of mystery. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, yet an undercurrent of danger lurked beneath it. "So, you chose not to share that with me?" Laura tightened her grip, compelling herself to hold his gaze. "I wasn't sure if you'd be interested in knowing." His eyes gleamed with a fire that bordered on rage. "So, you made that choice for me?" She took a deep breath. "Julian, you distinctly outlined your priorities back then. Your enterprise. Your dominion. You mentioned that your life had no space for anything beyond what you already had. You mentioned that distractions were not within your budget." His expression grew somber. So, you thought I wouldn't desire to have my own child? Laura felt a constriction in her throat. I took that to mean you would never be the father Emma truly deserved. Stillness lingered in the air between them. She observed the tension in Julian's jaw, the subtle way his fingers gripped the table's edge. She had witnessed his anger in the past, yet this time felt distinct. This was not a matter of commerce. This held deep significance. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, yet still carried a powerful intensity. Are you aware of what you have taken from me? Laura sensed a deep, unsettling twist within her. For years, she reassured herself that her choice was just, that she had shielded Emma from someone who would never prioritize her well-being. Yet, listening to him express it in that manner, sensing the subtle anguish underlying his fury, caused her to reevaluate everything. I acted in what I believed to be right, she murmured. Julian breathed out gently, as though he were attempting to hold back the tempest swirling within him. So, what's next? He inclined his body just a touch. Having gained this knowledge, what comes next? Laura paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. That was the inquiry she had been fearing. She had never envisioned this moment, never contemplated the consequences if Julian ever discovered the truth. The idea of him unexpectedly desiring a role in Emma's life filled her with dread. She had invested so much time in the belief that he was incapable of love, that he simply wouldn't care. Yet now, as she gazed at him, uncertainty crept in. I'm not sure, she confessed. Julian's gaze remained steadfast. Indeed, I do. Her stomach nodded. Julian. I refuse to turn my back on this. His voice carried a steady resolve, resolute and unyielding. She is my daughter. I am determined to understand her. A wave of panic washed over Laura. That decision isn't yours to make. There's no way I can't. His voice became more cutting. You prevented her from being with me. A choice was made that was not yours to decide. Now it's my moment to create one. Laura felt a sudden tightness in her throat. For 6 years, she had convinced herself that she held the reins of this secret. Yet, as she gazed into Julian Carter's unwavering green eyes, it dawned on her that she had truly lost it. Laura experienced a sudden, overwhelming sensation as if the very breath had been forcefully taken from her. She had sensed this moment was unavoidable the instant Emma had referred to Julian as daddy, but hearing him articulate it so clearly, so definitively, brought the reality of the situation crashing down on her. Julian was determined to stay put. He was determined not to let this slip away. The grip she had maintained on the situation for 6 long years was suddenly torn away, leaving her in a state of uncertainty about her next steps. She compelled herself to maintain a steady tone. Julian, this is more complex than you are portraying it. His expression grew steely. It's far from simple, Laura. However, it's no longer a choice you can make solely by yourself. She sealed her lips, battling the frustration simmering within her. I didn't hold her back from you to cause you pain. I took that step to ensure her safety. Julian's gaze grew shadowy. From where? From my perspective. She paused for just a heartbeat too long. His jaw tightened, and when he spoke once more, his voice dropped, more measured, yet tinged with an edge of intensity. Do you honestly believe I wouldn't have made a great father? Laura let out a slow breath. It seems you may not have been prepared for that role. Julian reclined a bit, his fingers drumming on the table while he observed her intently. And you made that choice without even allowing me the opportunity. She loathed the manner in which he expressed it. As if she had taken something precious from him. As if she had made a decision that was never meant to be hers. She averted her gaze for a brief instant, collecting her reflections. You had only just begun to establish your company, Julian. You toiled through 20-hour days, traversing the nation, securing one deal after another. Sleep was a luxury you could hardly afford, much less the chance to nurture a family. You mentioned that relationships could be a diversion. Those emotions rendered individuals vulnerable. Indeed, I have made a decision. I decided to create a life for Emma where she would always feel like a priority, never settling for anything less than first place. Julian's fingers clenched into a fist on the table, and for the first time since she had encountered him that night in the hotel lobby, she perceived something deeper than mere anger. She perceived remorse. His voice had grown softer now. And what if I had changed? Laura sensed a constriction in her throat. Would you possess? He took his time before responding. Instead, he remained seated, his green eyes probing hers, and she could perceive it unfolding, the understanding dawning within him. The realization of the extent of time that had slipped away. At last, he exhaled gently. Does it really hold any significance now? Laura took a deep breath. Absolutely not. It does not. Silence enveloped them, stretching on for what felt like an eternity. The atmosphere between them was charged, laden with a history of unspoken thoughts. Julian at last shattered the stillness. I wish to see her. Laura's heart raced with intensity. Julian. He expressed his desire to understand his daughter, his tone resolute. The past is of no concern to me. I am indifferent to any errors that occurred. Your opinion on my readiness at that time doesn't concern me. I exist in this moment. And you won't stop me from reaching her. Laura sensed she was perched on the brink of a precipice. For 6 years, she dedicated herself to ensuring Emma's safety, maintaining the simplicity of their life, and holding everything firmly within her grasp. Allowing Julian to enter brought the potential for everything to unravel. It involved allowing Emma to care for someone who might cause her pain. It required her to embrace the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, Julian Carter could become more than the person she had once recognized. And that filled her with a deeper fear than anything else. She released a deep, trembling sigh. Understood. Julian's gaze fixed intently on hers. Understood. She compelled herself to nod. She is visible to you. However, it must be according to my conditions. Gradually. With great attention. I refuse to allow you to enter her world only to leave once more. His jaw clenched, yet he gave a slight nod. I'm here to stay, Laura. She yearned to trust him. Indeed, she truly did. Yet, she was aware that Julian Carter had a tendency to move on quickly. Laura dedicated the remainder of the day to readying herself for what lay ahead, yet no degree of contemplation could calm the tempest swirling within her. Julian was set to meet Emma. It had transformed into an undeniable reality, a palpable anxiety that she could no longer ignore. It was unfolding. For 6 years, she had shielded her daughter from this very moment, convinced she was making the right choice, yet now doubt crept in, leaving her uncertain. Emma lacked the maturity to grasp the significance of what lay ahead. For her, life unfolded with clarity. She possessed a mother who cherished her, a sanctuary that felt secure, and aspirations that remained untainted by disillusionment. Yet Julian possessed the ability to transform everything. Laura lingered at the kitchen table, observing Emma as she immersed herself in a picture book, a gentle hum escaping her lips. Laura felt a tightness in her chest as she gazed at the purity in her expression. How could she possibly convey this to her? How could she possibly ready her daughter for a father who had always been absent, a father she had only recently learned about? Drawing in a calming breath, she spoke softly. Darling, may we have a moment to chat? Emma gazed upward, her face alight with a cheerful grin. Understood. She placed her crayon aside and leaned in, her small hands gently resting on the table. Laura paused for a brief moment. Do you recall the gentleman we encountered at the hotel yesterday? Emma's eyes sparkled with excitement. My father. Laura managed a faint smile, pushing aside the ache those words stirred within her heart. Indeed, that individual. She gulped. I had a conversation with him today, and he expressed a desire to meet you. Emma's expression was a blend of emotions that Laura found hard to define, perhaps excitement, a hint of curiosity, and just a touch of uncertainty. Is that so? Laura nodded, her fingers gripping the edge of the table with a subtle intensity. Absolutely. However, I want you to understand that you are not obligated to engage in anything that doesn't resonate with you. If you're feeling anxious or uncertain, just let me know, and we can work through it together. Understood. Emma inclined her head, deep in thought. Is he kind? Laura felt a pang in her chest at the question. She was at a loss for words. She had known Julian in his youth, when ambition had shielded his heart, and love had seemed to him a vulnerability. She was completely unaware of the kind of man he had become. She spoke with caution, expressing that he is eager to understand you better. It seems to me that he is making an effort to be kind. Emma pondered this for a moment, then gave a nod of agreement. Understood. I wish to meet him. Laura had anticipated this moment, yet hearing her daughter express it so candidly, so effortlessly, intensified the weight of the truth. She leaned over the table, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind Emma's ear. We'll rendezvous with him tomorrow, at the park. Only for a brief moment. Emma beamed, her enthusiasm bubbling over. May I present my drawings to him? Laura felt a constriction in her throat, yet she managed to nod. I believe he would appreciate that. That night, Laura found herself tossing and turning, sleep eluding her grasp. Every possible disaster played out in her thoughts, each fear she had attempted to suppress coming back with overwhelming intensity. What if Julian struggled to show tenderness towards Emma? What if he became disinterested and departed? What if Emma formed a deep bond, only to face heartbreak in the end? The following morning, she stood in the heart of a serene park, Emma's tiny hand clasped in hers, anticipating Julian's arrival. The sky gleamed with brightness, the air invigorating, children frolicking on the swings while couples strolled leisurely along the paved pathways. Yet none of it alleviated the weighty tension lodged in Laura's chest. At that moment, her gaze fell upon him. Julian moved forward with the familiar assurance that defined him, his towering figure gliding smoothly through the distance that separated them. Today, he opted for a dark sweater and jeans instead of a suit, yet he still appeared strikingly out of place, as if the realm of playgrounds and the sounds of children's laughter were foreign to him, untouched by his presence. Upon arriving, he halted several paces back, his eyes darting between Laura and Emma. His expression was inscrutable, shielded, yet there was a glimmer in his eyes that caused Laura to momentarily lose her breath. Emma gazed up at him, her large green eyes filled with wonder, her small fingers gripping Laura's hand more firmly. In that fleeting instant, silence enveloped everything. Julian then lowered himself to her level, his movements deliberate and measured, as if he were navigating a delicate situation. Hello, Emma. His voice was gentler than Laura had ever experienced. Emma regarded him for a moment before breaking into a smile. Hello. Julian paused, uncertainty flickering across his expression as he contemplated his next words. He then cleared his throat. Your mother mentioned that you enjoy drawing. Emma's expression brightened. I certainly do. Care to take a look? She reached into the small bag slung over her shoulder and pulled out a notebook, flipping it open to reveal one of her favorite drawings. Julian picked up the notebook with care, his gaze sweeping over the vibrant lines and shapes. Your skills in this area are impressive. Emma radiated joy. Mommy says I have a creative spirit. Julian stole a brief glance at Laura before redirecting his attention to Emma. I believe she has a valid point. Laura sensed a constriction in her chest. Julian found himself in uncharted waters. She noticed the uncertainty in his actions, the deliberate selection of his words, as though he feared making a mistake. Yet he was making an effort. And she was taken by surprise. Emma sprang on her toes. Are you fond of sketching? Julian exhaled softly, a glimmer of mirth dancing in his gaze. Not quite. However, I enjoy admiring fine illustrations. Emma smiled brightly. I have the ability to guide you. Laura felt a knot in her stomach at the simplicity of it all, at how effortlessly Emma welcomed Julian into her life, how instinctively she believed he would remain. She hoped with all her heart that this would succeed. That Julian would never cause her any harm. That this wouldn't culminate in the sorrow she had always dreaded. Julian glanced at Laura once more, and for the first time, an unvoiced connection lingered in the air between them. A quiet recognition of the stakes involved, of the significance of this moment. Laura inhaled deeply, summoning the courage to utter the words that filled her with fear. Would you care to join us for a bit? Julian acknowledged with a nod. Indeed. I would appreciate that. As they approached a nearby bench, Laura observed Emma chattering joyfully, eagerly flipping through her notebook to share more with him. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to entertain the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, this wouldn't conclude in the manner she had always dreaded. Laura anticipated that the initial encounter between Julian and Emma would be fraught with tension, awkwardness, and a sense of uncertainty. What she hadn't anticipated was the speed at which Emma embraced him, how seamlessly she drew him into her realm. Following their initial encounter in the park, Julian began to visit more frequently. Initially, the encounters were brief, with limited exchanges and careful engagements. Yet Emma appeared to lack the same reservations that Laura experienced. She had come to the conclusion that Julian was her father, and to her, that signified he was a part of her life. She never pondered the absence of his presence in the past. She always maintained a sense of grace, free from any bitterness. She embraced him wholeheartedly. Laura, on the other hand, felt uncertain about her ability to achieve the same. One evening, several weeks after their initial encounter, Julian rapped on her apartment door. She paused briefly before opening it, grappling with the sight of him standing there, so unlike the world she had crafted for herself and Emma. Though he wasn't wearing one of his costly suits, he still appeared somewhat incongruous in her quaint, unassuming home. Is Emma prepared? He inquired, his gaze drifting beyond her into the apartment. Laura moved to the side, granting him entry. She is completing her artwork. She will remain until she finds satisfaction with it. Julian offered a subtle smirk as he placed a small bag on the counter. She approaches her craft with great dedication. Laura folded her arms, observing him intently. Indeed, she does. Silence enveloped them, dense and oppressive. These instances had grown increasingly common, occasions when they found themselves in solitude, compelled to confront the intricate truth of their actions. Laura found herself uncertain about the current state of their relationship. They existed in a space between animosity and camaraderie. They existed in a space that was neither here nor there, a realm of ambiguity, bound together by the innocent presence of the small girl in the other room, blissfully unaware of the intricate history that lay between them. Julian raked his fingers through his hair, letting out a slow breath. I was thinking, he said, his voice now softer. Emma is starting to feel at ease around me. I wish to dedicate more moments to her. Laura felt a surge of tension. She encounters you nearly every day. That's not what I mean, he stated, his eyes fixed intently on hers. I wish to invite her out. Only she and I. Laura felt a knot in her stomach. She had anticipated this moment, yet it still felt just as difficult. For 6 years, Emma had always been within her line of vision, never straying far for more than a few hours. The idea of her being alone with Julian, of placing her trust in him to take her somewhere, to be accountable for her, washed over her with a surge of anxiety. Julian must have noticed the uncertainty in her expression, as his demeanor shifted to one of gentle understanding. Laura, I understand that this is a challenging situation for you. However, I have no intention of leaving. I must begin creating something genuine with her. Laura swallowed hard, her fingers gripping her arms with increasing intensity. What if she becomes overly invested? Julian's jaw clenched. She is my daughter. She ought to be connected. Laura averted her gaze, searching for the perfect words, striving to convey her thoughts to him. I need reassurance that you won't vanish on me. She places her trust so readily, Julian. Should you choose to depart? I shall not. His voice carried a resolute strength, allowing for no dissent. She glanced back at him, probing his expression, attempting to uncover any remnants of the person she had once recognized, the individual who had been so engulfed by ambition that nothing else held significance. Yet, the figure before her was no longer the individual she once knew. He remained cautious, still keen, yet there was an unmistakable change in the air. A sense of stability. At last, she exhaled gently. Where would you like to bring her? Julian's face remained impassive, yet a flicker in his eyes hinted at a sense of relief. A children's museum is located downtown. I believed she would appreciate it. Laura paused for a brief moment before giving a nod. All right. However, if she inquires about me, ensure you bring her back right away. Julian gave a slight nod. Absolutely. Just as Laura was about to speak, Emma burst into the room, proudly displaying a new drawing. Hey, Dad. This has been created with you in mind. Julian knelt, gently retrieving the paper from her grasp. The image captured the trio perfectly, with Emma positioned in the center, flanked by Julian on one side and Laura on the other. His breath hitched as he gazed at it, his fingers gliding over the vibrant, intricate lines. This is incredible, darling, he remarked, his tone gentler than normal. Emma smiled brightly. It needs to be placed in a unique spot. Julian's lips curled into a smile as he delved into the depths of his jacket pocket, retrieving his wallet with a practiced ease. With precision, he folded the drawing and placed it inside, nestled beside his business cards and essential documents. Laura observed the transformation in Emma's expression, the way Julian clutched the drawing as if it held significance, and for the first time, she contemplated the possibility that she might have misjudged him. The morning of Emma's first outing with Julian arrived faster than Laura was ready for. She had hardly closed her eyes the previous night, her thoughts consumed by anxiety. She didn't think Julian would ever mean to harm Emma, she was certain of that. Yet, trust was something that didn't come naturally to her. For 6 years, she devoted herself to safeguarding her daughter, meticulously weighing each choice to guarantee that Emma always felt cherished and secure. Releasing her, even for a brief moment, felt akin to relinquishing control of something she had clung to with an iron grip for far too long. Emma, on the other hand, was filled with nothing but enthusiasm. She flitted about the apartment while Laura assisted her in getting dressed, eagerly discussing all the exhibits she was excited to explore at the museum. Laura compelled a smile, determined not to let her own anxieties spoil the occasion. This was not concerning her. It centered around Emma. The sound of a knock at the door sent a jolt of tension through Laura's stomach. She inhaled deeply before unveiling it, and there he stood, Julian, clad in a dark sweater and jeans, appearing more at ease than she had ever witnessed. Yet his gaze was keen, probing her features as though he could perceive the struggle within her. "Good morning," he said. Laura moved aside, granting him entry. "You've arrived right on schedule." Julian smirked. "Absolutely. I aim to leave a positive impact." Before Laura could reply, Emma dashed over to him, practically buzzing with enthusiasm. "Father. Shall we head out now?" Julian knelt beside her, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Absolutely, are you prepared?" Emma nodded vigorously, her curls dancing with enthusiasm. "My mom prepared a delightful snack for me, and I made sure to bring my notebook along, just in case I come across something inspiring to sketch." Julian cast a fleeting look at Laura, an enigmatic glimmer passing through his gaze before he redirected his attention to Emma. "What a fantastic notion. I can't wait to see all the creations you come up with once we're finished." Emma radiated joy, clasping his hand as though they were lifelong companions. Laura compelled herself to retreat a step. Have her reach out if she wishes to return home. Julian's demeanor shifted to one of gravity. I shall. She paused, glancing back and forth between him and Emma, every instinct urging her to discover a justification for keeping her daughter close. Yet, she found herself unable to do that. Emma had earned this opportunity. She knelt, gently tucking a stray lock of hair behind Emma's ear. Enjoy yourself, darling. Emma gave a slight nod. I shall. Adore you, Mom. Laura pressed her lips gently to her forehead. Adore you as well. She observed Julian guiding Emma out of the apartment, the door clicking shut behind them, leaving her in the stillness of a vacant home. She exhaled a breath she hadn't known she was keeping in. Time dragged on, stretching out in a way she never imagined it could. With every buzz of her phone, her heart raced, only to be met with the disappointment of unimportant notifications. A message from Julian indicating their arrival. A snapshot of Emma beaming in front of a dinosaur display. A note informing her that they were going out for lunch. As the afternoon wore on, the knock echoed through the house, prompting Laura to hurriedly make her way to the door. Emma stood there, beaming with delight, her hands tightly grasping a small bag from the museum gift shop. Mother! It was amazing, she exclaimed, darting past her and rushing indoors. Fossils and celestial wonders filled the day, and my father gifted me a book about planets after I shared my dream of becoming an astronaut. Laura felt a deep pang in her chest as Emma spoke so casually, as if Julian had always been a part of her life, as if she had never endured years of absence. Julian entered behind her, observing Laura with keen attention. She performed exceptionally well. Laura locked eyes with him, probing for any indication that this might have been a misstep. Yet all she perceived was a constant presence. Something genuine. Thank you, she murmured gently. Julian acknowledged with a nod. I truly meant what I expressed, Laura. I'm staying right here. She breathed out gently, her gaze fixed on Emma, who was effortlessly leafing through her new book, radiating tranquility. Perhaps, just perhaps, she might begin to trust him. This narrative transcends the mere revelation of a hidden truth. It delves into the profound impact of redemption and the significance of the decisions we undertake. Laura was certain she was making the right choice by shielding Emma from Julian, convinced that she was safeguarding her daughter from heartache. Ultimately, her actions were not solely about protecting Emma, they were also a means of safeguarding her own heart. For years, she had lived in the shadow of the man Julian once was, never allowing herself to entertain the thought that transformation is possible, that time can mold a person into something greater than their past. Julian's journey is equally significant. He begins as a man driven by ambition, viewing relationships merely as distractions, until he comes to understand that the most significant thing he had overlooked was right before him all along. His struggle to be part of Emma's life transcends mere obligation, it embodies love, a testament to his desire to show that he can evolve beyond the man Laura once recognized. The concluding moments of the narrative may not guarantee perfection, yet they offer a glimmer of hope. Laura remains cautious about Julian, yet she is open to giving it a chance. Julian may not embody the ideal father figure, yet he remains committed. And Emma, the essence of it all, finally embraces the family she never realized she was longing for. It's a gentle nudge that affection doesn't always require perfection from the very beginning. At times, it involves the decision to remain, the determination to battle, and the conviction that improvement is always within reach.